is a reply to a video by XOmniverse, who is replying to Pat Condell, so let me quickly bring you up to speed in case you haven't been following. Pat made about, I think, 2 videos at least, talking about the issue of the burqa, which is of course the Islamic dress that women wear in certain countries that covers their entire body, leaving only basically a slit for their eyes. Condell was criticizing liberals and feminists for not attacking the burqa more and trying to push to make it illegal. XOmniverse made a reply video in which he argued that outlawing the burqa would be a very bad idea because once the government starts imposing a dress code on people, well, where are we then? So XOmniverse, I see sort of two core points that you make that I want to address. But first off, let me say what I think is definitely right about your video. I think you are right, or at least you seem to be right, that Pat Condell fails to distinguish between the idea that something should be immoral and the idea that something should be illegal. At least in those 2 videos, he doesn't really seem to make that kind of subtle distinction. Now, Condell, of course, is a firebrand, a bit of a bomb thrower. I have my differences with him. I don't particularly care for that strategy. I generally agree with him and find him amusing, but I also think that he doesn't really advance any sort of constructive dialogue. That having been said, I actually do think I agree with him and not with you in this particular instance. I actually do think that there's a good, strong case to be made for outlawing the burqa. And to see why that is, let's address the two primary points that you make. The first point is sort of just a straightforward libertarian argument. It's none of the government's goddamn business what I choose to wear or what any of its citizens choose to wear. That's something that should be left totally to the individual to choose, and it's none of the government's business whatsoever. And then the second argument that you seem to make is the slippery slope argument, which is, once we let the government start regulating clothing, what next? Are they going to start regulating diet? Are they going to start regulating other areas of life? So we best just draw the line right here and not let them pursue it. So sort of, you might say one is a principled argument, one is more of a consequentialist argument. Now, both these arguments are reasonable and sensible, but I don't think that they actually persuade for a couple of reasons. First off, the government already regulates dress code. I mean, to a very minimal extent, granted, but this is actually something that Pat Condell mentioned. You can't walk around nude in public. There's a fair amount of nudists out there who would very much like to do this, and their liberty is being constrained by the government. Now, maybe you believe in this libertarian principle enough that you think this is wrong, and that you believe that nudists should be allowed to walk around in public, and that's fine. I think a reasonable argument can be made there. But at the same time, it's disingenuous to suggest that somehow the government would be breaking new ground if they were to start regulating dress code in this way, because they already do, at least in some certain fairly minimal regards. Next up, the slippery slope argument that, well, nude is one thing, burqa is another. How much further are we willing to go? I think the point here has to be one about basic common judgment. And I know that the judgment of the government and of human beings in general is pretty poor and doesn't have a very good track record. But if we just dig in our heels on any sort of principle, no matter what that principle is, and just become fundamentalists about it, this principle is sacrosanct, this principle of liberty should never to be violated under any circumstances whatsoever, we become dogmatists. So I think the alternative there is to say this: we need to make sensible judgments. And if a reasonable argument can be made that X should be illegal, if X is a dress code or eating a certain food or whatever, then we should listen to that reasonable argument. If that argument is persuasive, then it should be allowed to carry the day. So what then is the argument, or at least my argument, as to why I think burqas should be outlawed? I'll be honest with you, I've wrestled with this one. I'm not unsympathetic to the libertarian principle, and at first, I remember a few years back when France outlawed them in schools, I was opposed to that, I rejected it, but I've talked to a lot of people, I've thought about it, and I've come to change my mind on the issue, due primarily to something that Pat Condell alluded to. I didn't change my mind because of Pat, but he did allude to something. It was the point about wearing a hockey mask, wearing a ski mask in a bank. This is something you're not allowed to do. Now, why? The vast majority of people who would wear hockey masks into banks aren't bank robbers. They're perfect law-abiding citizens. They're living in some place where it's snowy and they need something to cover their face, and they walk into a bank, they want to do their business. There's a perfectly sensible reason for that being illegal. And that perfectly sensible reason is, while 99 out of 100 guys who walk into a bank with a ski mask on are probably perfectly law-abiding citizens, that 100th guy is going to hold the damn place up. So the law-abiding citizens who wear the ski masks into the bank provide cover for the ones that are going to be breaking the law. And that's the same basic principle, I think, that applies in the case of the burqa. Many women, no doubt, choose to wear burqas freely and autonomously. I don't doubt that. But at the same time, there's at least a reasonable percentage of women who do it because they have been coerced, because they've been brainwashed, because they've been forced in some capacity or another to wear it, and their decision to wear it is not their own, or is not a genuine, legitimate choice. It's a choice that's been foisted onto them. Now, how do we tell the difference? There's no way to tell the difference just by looking at them, and in fact, there's no plausible way to tell the difference without getting into people's lives, and then we end up in Big Brother territory, and it's pretty scary right there. So there's no real way to distinguish between them. So, if nothing else, the women who choose to wear the burqa of their own free will are doing a horrible, horrible thing to other women who don't choose to do it, who are being forced to do it. They are providing cover for the abuse that's going on with those women. Now, just like when the people walk into the bank wearing the ski masks, they're doing something wrong, even if they're not going to be holding up the bank, because they provide cover. They make it harder for people to tell when a bank robber's there and when it's just someone going about their business. So we've got a reasonable principle here for saying you should not be allowed to wear ski masks in a bank. I think the same basic principle should apply to burqas. You should not be allowed to wear a burqa, not necessarily because you are being forced to, but because if you wear one, you provide cover for that oppression. You normalize that oppression and make it harder to detect. Now, I'm not completely convinced of this argument. Again, like I say, I've been thinking about this a lot. My opinions are not entirely set in stone. They're somewhat fluid. So if XOmniverse or anyone else out there sees a problem with this argument or doesn't like it, I would love to hear a critical response or a video response to give me your thoughts, because mine are still developing and evolving. So thank you very much.